Good day, and thank you for joining the closing session of the FAM Strong 20 virtual series. And on behalf of the Morehouse School of Medicine Prevention Research Center, we welcome you to part 13 of the FAM Strong series. Additionally, we invite you to connect with the MSM PRC via your favorite social media platform using the hashtag FAMStrong20. The mission of the Morehouse School of Medicine, PRC, is to advance scientific knowledge in the field of prevention in African American and other minority communities and to disseminate new information and strategies of prevention. The MSM PRC strongly holds to the applied definition of community-based research, which is dynamic, prioritizes community and research entity partnerships, is focused on prevention, is tailor-made, is ethnically and culturally focused, and prioritizes health policy to advance health equity. I now present to you part 13 entitled Self-Love, presented by Dr. Marietta Collins and Mrs. Pamela Merritt. And now, Dr. Collins.
Okay, I'd like to say good afternoon to everyone. And I'm real pleased to have been asked to come and be a part of FAM Strong 20. This is my first opportunity to be a part of this program. And I'm very excited just to kind of talk to you guys a little bit this afternoon about self-care and just ways to prioritize yourselves during this very stressful time. I'm going to get ready now to share my screen. I believe I should be able to do that there it is there. Hopefully, there we go. And let's see here. There we go. Great. I wanted to go back one if possible. Let me go back. All right, great. Excellent. Thank you so much. Again, thank you again for inviting me to be a part of this this program, which sounds like a really good program. And I'm going to talk again about self-care during this time as I think about it. I think about this period, beginning, I would say from March, up until now, as a period, of course, when all of our efforts have been focused on trying to be healthy and take care of ourselves and our families and our loved ones because of COVID. But we were also really confronted with a lot of racial unrest. So we've had two really big stressors during this year of 2020. So I'm going to try and just provide just a few tips in terms of how we can really take care of ourselves and prioritize ourselves during this period. Okay, as this slide indicates, of course, life is a balancing act. Now, I used to be able to say, well, it's a balancing act because women have, so many women are working outside of the home. And, again, because of COVID, that's not necessarily the case anymore, but it still has its own set of stressors to be working within the home with your family and children there. So life is certainly a balancing act as you try to prioritize your family, prioritize relationships within your family, be it that as a mother, a wife, a daughter, or whatever. And you also want to prioritize whatever career it is you have for yourself. And what about your health? You have to prioritize your own health and those really, really important friendships. So trying to figure out a way to balance all of those can be very, very challenging indeed. You may think on the, one hand that I have it all together and I have it balanced, and then something happens and oops, your balance is off. So life is a continual balancing act, and we have to really be ready to make adjustments so that we can try and stay balanced while taking care of ourselves. This slide here just talks about the fact that stress is really a necessary part of our lives. Some people associate stress with negativity, but stress is not always negative. Stress is really the body's response or reaction to any change that requires an adjustment. This could be a positive strain, and in that case, it's called eustress, or it could be a negative stress, and that's called distress. But it's basically the body is reacting to change, just trying to adjust with physical, mental, and emotional responses to whatever this change is that's happened within your body. Uh, these, of course, are some of the symptoms of stress. Once your body gets this message that they need to change and make an adjustment, these are some of the things that are affected by stress. Physically, you may start to feel less healthy. You may start to feel more tense. Certainly you're just more stressed than you used to be, and your body lets you know that very quickly. And emotionally, you may be a lot more out of control than you were, a lot less able to maintain, again, that balance that I talked about before, because you're stressed. And that stress is affecting your relationships with your family, with your friend. It's really even affecting your behavior. One of the things that I stress as a psychologist is the importance of taking care of oneself. And I really urge as many of my patients as I can to exercise, be it just walking around the block, walking in the neighborhood, doing whatever kind of exercise it is. And you may have been able to commit to doing that, but then stress comes in, and all of a sudden you don't feel like you want to do that anymore. And that is the time when it's really important to continue to take care of yourself in terms of those behavioral changes that you've made. And spiritually, you may have been, the kind of person that was very connected spiritually and got a lot of, I guess, good feelings and support from your spiritual community. But then when stress comes, you may withdraw from that spiritual support group that you had, and you may really question the relationship you had with your higher power. Occupationally, you see yourself perhaps going downhill and not being as productive as you would like to have been in the past, because you are stressed. And of course, this does affect those social relationships. So again, these are some of the symptoms of stress that happen when your body is trying to make the adjustments that it needs to make. So, which are you? Are you type A? Are you type B? Are you the kind of person that wants to climb that mountain just because it's there? Or are you the kind of person that wants to just kind of chill and relax on this mountain because the mountain is there? And what we know is that type A people tend to, certainly be very successful, but certainly that increases your risk for all kinds of medical issues. If you're type A, it may increase your risk for high blood pressure, other kinds of physical issues, whereas a person that is type B tends to figure out a way to kind of relax and do the kinds of things that they need to do to be able to hopefully take better care of themselves. Okay, so what are some of the positive ways you can deal with stress? Well, as this slide says here, I keep hitting escape, but I'm still here, okay? So one of the things that I talk to my patients about a lot is how important it is to really try and address and change those self-defeating thoughts and negative messages that you are giving yourself, that you're paying attention to in your mind. So what I try to tell them to do is to block those negative messages and to try and instead frame positive messages. Think about a positive time in your life that will help you to be able to block off the negative and self-defeating messages that you're telling yourself time and time again. So a more positive way to deal with stress is to try and block out those negative messages and pay attention instead to and try and generate more positive messages, more self-enhancing thoughts and messages to yourself. And also to try to give yourself a break and not be quite as hard on yourself by changing or adjusting the beliefs that you have to be more realistic. Certainly we may have all been able to function at a very high level prior to COVID, prior to all this, the stress of the societal stress that we've had. But now we might need to adjust that so that we can, we may not be able to have been as productive as we wanted to be or have been in the past in certain areas, because we have to focus again on ourselves, on our families. We have to figure out a way to take care of ourselves given what's happening in our world. And one thing that's always important, of course, is that we acquire a sense of humor. Try to laugh about things. Try not to take life and the world so seriously if you can. Okay. So talking about self-care, of course, self-care is really taking action to try and improve oneself. It's really focusing on yourself. What can I do to protect myself and make myself happy, to make myself more balanced? What can I do, especially during periods of stress, to prioritize myself? It's really about prioritizing the relationship that we have with ourselves and put forth consistent effort to make sure that we're sustaining this positive relationship that we have with ourselves. And as Black women, sometimes we put ourselves, at the back of the whole line. We're taking care of everybody else except ourselves. It's women in general that may happen. But self-care is really about saying, hey, I'm important too. I need to do some things to preserve my own health. I need to preserve some things to help me stay balanced and stay happy in this world. So self-care really targets both your emotional, your physical, your psychological, and your spiritual health. Self-care does encourage you to maintain, again, a very healthy relationship with yourself, because you can't give to others if you don't have anything left and you haven't given to yourself. You have to be able to give to yourself and take care of yourself so that you can have something to give to others. And one thing that I really stress is that self-care is not being selfish. It's not about being self-indulgent. It's about being it's about being preserving yourself. It's about self-preservation. That's what self-care is about. It's not about being selfish. Even though I'm asking you to prioritize yourself, it does not mean that you're not taking care of other people. You're prioritizing yourself because you deserve it. And that's a message I want you to give yourself time and time again, is that self-care is not about being self-indulgent. It's about self-preservation. Okay. And what I wanted to talk just a little bit about is what is one way we can not pay attention to those negative thoughts that we sometimes have? What is one way we can take care of ourselves? And one tool that I think is a tool that doesn't take a whole lot of time is learning how to be more mindful. It's called mindfulness. And that's certainly a way of really making yourself focus on the moment and moment-to-moment awareness of how you're feeling, your thoughts, how your body is feeling, what's happening in your surrounding, through a lens that's non-judgmental. It involves acceptance of yourself, paying attention to how you're feeling, what your thoughts are, without believing there's a right or wrong way we should be feeling in this particular moment.
Oh, Lord, look what's coming out.
I'm sorry. And it's about just really focusing in on what's happening at this moment, focusing in, let's say if you were eating an apple, you're focusing in on the fact that you're biting this apple. What does it feel like when you're biting this apple? What does the sweetness of that apple taste like? What is the texture? And again, whatever it is that you're focusing on when you're practicing mindfulness, you're doing it through a non-judgmental lens, okay? Here are some of the components of mindfulness here. It's really, mindfulness is done with intention. The intention is to cultivate awareness of something in particular. And again, if what you're doing is you're going out on a walk and you're trying to practice mindfulness when you are going on that walk, you intend to go out on this walk, you intend to pay attention, which is the next one, to the things that are around you. You intend to focus on how cool and crisp the air now feels, the color of the leaves, the sounds of the leaves as you walk through, let's say, a yard. And your attitude is really about being non-judgmental, curious, and kind. And it's not about going on a walk so that I can lose weight, going on a walk so I can solve this problem. No, it's going on a walk so that you can intentionally de-stress, so that you can intentionally put your mind in a more positive place. Okay, these are some of the benefits of mindfulness. It really does help us to be able to incorporate meditation as a part of our regular routine. Meditation, prayer, happiness, patience, acceptance. These are all of the benefits of mindfulness. If you can put yourself in a place where you're not paying attention to negative thoughts, where you're focusing on where you are at this point, you're meditating on where you are and on positive things, it can really decrease your stress. Okay, and I'm really hoping that this next slide will work for me. Here we go. This is a mindfulness exercise that takes about a minute to do. I wanted to share with each of you.
So no matter what's going on in your life right now, no matter how many thoughts are racing around your mind,
let's try to pay attention.
No matter how the body's feeling, just take a moment to sit down and take a big, deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, a sense of taking in fresh air, the lungs expanding. As you breathe out, a sense of letting go of any stress, in the body, in the mind, just feeling the muscles soften and relax. And close your eyes if you'd like to. One more. Breathing deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just take a moment to pause. Allow the thoughts to come and go. And then just gently opening the eyes again.
Okay, so that's an example of how we can just take a minute to be mindful, just to focus on our breathing in and out, okay? And just again, trying to put our mind in a more positive place. I did want to just end my next couple of slides, just talk real briefly about techniques related to COVID, that can help us to get the emotional support that we need. This is the emotional support line that was developed for COVID. I wanted to share that on the screen, okay? And I also just wanted to share a couple of final slides that talk about mental health, being a time of transition, things again that we can do for self-care and how we can prioritize ourselves. This is something that I talk a lot about, is reducing how much exposure you have to the media. I remember when COVID first started, it was like COVID. I remember when the social unrest first started. That's what we heard a lot about. Now we hear a lot of political ads, very negative political ads most of the time. So I really urge you to reduce your exposure to the media, and also to grieve when you need to grieve. That's again an important thing. Grieve out loud if you need to, and watch for how you're feeling internally. I know I'm kind of rushing through these, but I know we only have 30 minutes, and I can certainly share these slides. But to get help for any unhealthy behaviors that you might have, that you're having a hard time getting rid of. This last one just says, dance and sing like nobody's watching. Just enjoy your life. Again, these are techniques that we found to be helpful, in terms of trying to de-stress and to practice self-care and prioritize yourself. Acknowledge that you can't control everything, stay balanced, breathe in and out, connect with families and friends, and laugh. Okay. So, as I end, my question would be, what is your self-care? What do you do for self-care, and what do you do for self-care on a consistent basis? My self-care during this particular period of stress has been to write a children's book here. Okay, that's really helped me to de-stress from what's happening around me. It's called Something That Happened in Our Town, a child story about racial injustice. I've got involved in empowerment activities again, to put my mind in a place to make me feel like I'm making a difference. So that's what I did to de-stress. And, this is one thing that we've said, is to treat racism like COVID, when we've gone, into certain workshops, me and my co-authors, assume that you have racism, like you assume people have COVID that you don't know. You don't want to spread racism, and you want to change your life, the way you live your life, in order to end it. So thank you for your time. I hope this was helpful to you. And I'm going to turn over the screen now to Miss Merritt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. If you can just stop sharing your screen, we can, perfect. And we will start sharing our screen on this side.
All righty, great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pamela Merritt, and I am more than honored to be a part of the panel for the Morehouse School of Medicine. I'm always humbled when I get a call or an email that asks me to come and talk about something. I feel kind of smart every time they reach out. So I am so grateful to everyone that has put this together so that we can come together and meet and kind of talk about some of the things that we need to do in order to take care of ourselves in the midst of COVID and, not expecting it to go this long. So I just want to give a brief presentation for you all, and feel free to chat on the side, because I don't want to do a whole lot of lecturing. I do like for you all to interact with each other. So I'll start with this. What I'm going to talk about today is virtual fatigue, which is like Zoom, e-learning, virtual meetings. And then the second thing that I'm going to talk about briefly is seasonal depression. So I want everybody to take a look at these pictures, 1, 2, and 3. And then in the chat, I want you to tell me which one resonates with you when it comes to virtual fatigue. I'll give you just a quick second. I honestly think that I'm too. I am too. So while you all decide which one you are, let me talk a little bit about that. Before COVID came, we had the privilege of meeting in person, right? So there were things that we didn't necessarily have to pay extra attention to because we were all sitting in the same space. And then COVID came and it was no longer safe to be next to your coworker in close quarters. So there were adjustments that we had to make when it came to how are we going to meet? How are we going to connect? How are we going to talk? How are we going to see each other? And then it was like, oh, Zoom, Skype, StreamYard, Duo, uh, uh, Facebook Messenger. It was all of the live virtual video streaming. And for a second, we were extremely relieved with the amount of time that we gained by not having to go into the office. So that meant that if we had a meeting at 10 o'clock, we could roll out of the bed at 9:30, get dressed from the waist up, wear our pajamas from the waist down, pull our hair back real quick or brush it real quick or throw, just do that really quick. That was like really beneficial for us. What we didn't expect was to be exhausted from back to back to back to back virtual meetings. We didn't prepare for having to stare at the screen for hours and hours, day after day. That wasn't something we were prepared for. So I'm going to try to tell you really briefly why we're so fatigued and give you a few tips to kind of help with that. So one of the main reasons we are so fatigued when it comes to our virtual gatherings and meetings and things like that is because when we are in person, there are nonverbal cues that we can pick up on. There's body language we can pick up on. There are sidebar conversations that we can hear that kind of keep us connected to what's happening in the meeting. So if I'm in a meeting, for example, think about being in meetings with your coworkers and you can look down, you can text on your phone, or you may jot a note. But at the same time, you also hear the details of the meeting. Maybe it's from the people next to you. What has happened virtually, now that we're all meeting virtually, is that we don't have the luxury of a sidebar conversation to stay connected. We don't have the luxury of just kind of doing something else and catching it because our sense that we're using the most is our sense of sight. And our brains aren't set up to be staring at a screen for hours at a time. And so, what our brain processes as we're staring at the screen, what we would normally process side by side, just based off of our peripheral or something that we catch with our ears, we're having to try to figure it out while we look at it visually. So not only are we trying to pay attention to the content that's being given to us, we're also looking for verbal cues. We're also looking for nonverbal cues. We're also looking at body language. We're also preoccupied with the way we look on screen. Put in the chat if you spend a lot of time looking at your own picture to see what your facial expressions look like, to see if your face is straight, to make sure there's nothing on. We spend a lot of time doing that. And so because we're doing that, it takes a lot of brain power. So when those meetings are over, we are completely exhausted. We are exhausted because we don't have the luxury of using all of those senses that we would use if we were gathered together. It's just eyes and ears, and mostly eyes. So I'm gonna give you some tips on how to combat virtual fatigue. Let me add really quickly before I go into the tips. A lot of what's happening with our children with e-learning, they are also stressed because they aren't cognitively developed enough to be as focused as we are, as adults are. So not only are they looking at themselves, they're looking at all of their classmates. They are trying to pay close attention to what's being said. There are things that are happening in their houses, and it's even harder for the young kids to do virtual learning. It's even more exhausting for them. So I'll give you a couple of tips and then I'll move to fighting seasonal depression. So, one thing you can do is keep virtual meetings in their place. Have a designated area where you do all of your virtual stuff, whether it is a meeting, whether it is a training or an e-learning. Have a particular space, if you can, in your home or in your room, where once you leave that space, that's it. So you're not walking around with your computer all the time, or you don't sit on the sofa and do your meeting. You don't sit on the bed and do your meeting. You don't sit wherever. You have a designated space for that. That's one thing that you can do. Try not to multitask, because when we meet in person, like I said, you can catch sidebar conversations. You can stop somebody and ask them to clarify. You can do all types of things that help you stay connected and on track. Virtually, though, the minute we look away, it's almost like a disconnect because our eyes are doing the majority of the work. So when we do things virtually that we would have normally done face to face, like maybe send a text real quick, check my email real quick, that doesn't really work with taking in information through the computer, because we need to stay focused because our eyes are doing all the work. I hope this is making sense for everybody and it's not too fast. Doodle. Doodling may sound like multitasking, but it's not, because doodling is like a physical manifestation of the process of the brain. So get you out a pen and paper, get you out pencil, whatever, doodle. It works. It also helps you focus, which will like help your ears if you're focused a little bit more. So doodle. Building breaks. I tell all of my clients this. Build breaks into your schedule. I know sometimes we feel like, oh, at 12:30 I'll take a break. Oh, at 2 I'll take a break. No, put that break on your schedule the same way you put the meeting on your schedule. It is so important to have time to disconnect. Now, you can do some deep breaths during that break. You may go outside and get some sun during that break. You may call somebody and just kind of chat it up for a minute. Anything that you can do to disconnect virtually, to give your eyes a break, your brain a break, do that. Okay, so I'm going to move on to seasonal depression. And seasonal depression is a form of depression for some people that some people tend to experience during the fall and the winter. And that is attributed to the days being shorter and there being less sunlight. So during the fall and winter months, what happens is we get less sun, and um, the sun and having shorter days is doesn't help us produce the same amount of melatonin. The melatonin is what helps us feel restful. It's what helps us relax. It's what helps us sleep. So we don't produce the same amount in the winter months. We also don't produce the same amount of serotonin, which is that happy, good chemical that I'm sure Dr. Collins could give us all a lesson on. That serotonin is that good chemical that helps us feel good and gets us going. We don't get a whole lot of that in the wintertime either. And if you are someone who has pre-existing mental health conditions like anxiety, you already suffer with a little bit of depression. I have friends that will tell me my mood is different when wintertime comes, and they start describing to me what they're dealing with. And I say, oh, those are symptoms of seasonal depression. This is what you do. So I'm going to give these tips to you all. One way that you can combat seasonal depression is engaging in activities that are safe, because COVID is still rampant. So I'm going to tell y'all what my husband and I did the other night. So some friends from our church invited us over for dinner. We were like, cool, we'll wear a mask. We were going to do it outside. No biggie. We pulled up to the house, and our friend's wife had set up the entire driveway like a dining area. So there were tables in the driveway that were 6 feet apart. There were candles on the table. The table was fully set, like all of the plates and spoons and napkins and it looked like a little restaurant. That felt so good to be able to get with friends safely. And even though it wasn't a restaurant, the creativity of it had us all just like feeling really good. So that's one thing that you can do. Be creative about it. Another thing that you can do is interacting virtually with the theme. So a lot of people are having birthday parties or they're having their baby showers. The holidays are coming up, so you can do something that is Halloween themed, because might not be necessarily safe to gather up in a crowd and have a Halloween party. So you can do themed stuff. You can do a themed fall virtual party or get together. You can do a Christmas one. I was telling the ladies before we started that my friends and I sometimes do a virtual happy hour. So we'll send a time out to everybody. Everybody jump online with whatever your beverage of choice is, wine or whatever. We spend a couple of hours catching up, decompressing, supporting each other. So that's another thing that you can do to help combat that seasonal depression. Another very important thing is maximizing light in your home. Open up your windows, turn the lights on. That is very, very, very helpful. Also, go outside and get some sun, because we don't have the allotted hours that we used to have. When the sun is out, go out and get you some for a few minutes. That is very, very, very helpful. And last but not least, I would be remiss if I didn't say, if you need talk therapy, do that. If you need to get a therapist, if you need to see somebody because you aren't able to work through this on your own and you aren't able to figure out, you're doing it, but it's not working for you, you may need to talk to somebody, and that's perfectly fine if that's what you need to do. So, I have a friend. The last thing I'm going to say is I have a friend that I grew up with who battles seasonal depression every fall and winter. So I reached out to her and I said, tell me some of the stuff that you've learned to do. And she said, routine. That was the main word she said. She said, I have a winter routine. She said, and so I make sure that I incorporate the things that make me feel good. This is what's helpful for me so that I can make sure I don't fall into that slump. I have a routine. And I said, perfect. So what I'm bringing to y'all is what my friend said worked for her. Routine. Fill your routine with things that make you feel good, that help relax you, that pick up your spirits, that are entertaining and engaging. Because not only are we dealing with the effects of the winter months and the seasonal changes, but we are also still dealing with the restrictions of COVID-19. So it's really important to have some stuff in place and be kind of proactive about it and not waiting until you start to feel bad and then trying to figure out what to do. Just go ahead and figure out what you can implement now so that when you feel your mood start to get kind of funky, you already have a go-to. So yeah, before I go, I do want to let you give you the resources, because sometimes we just need resources when we're in a place where we can't necessarily get to somebody. So I do have several mental health resources, and I also have all the ways that you can connect with me at the bottom of that slide. And that's it. That's all I have. I hope there was something that you all were able to take from it. If not for yourself, for somebody that you know and care about.
Thank you so very much, Mrs. Merritt. So we are now open for Q&A. Please feel free to submit your questions in the chat space, and I will be asking questions from registration. So this first question is for both Dr. Collins and Mrs. Merritt. And the question is with regard to the content that we consume very frequently on television. Some may perceive it as negative content, some of it may perceive it as informational content. But specifically regarding regarding examples of injustice pertaining to communities of color, would you consider it beneficial for communities of color to consume the videos of police brutality?
What I would say is that certainly it's important to stay informed about what is happening in our world, but I do not recommend overconsumption of media around stressful events. It's important, again, to get the factual information, to stay abreast of what's going on, and to really make decisions for yourself in terms of how involved you want to be, if there is an action you want to take. But overconsumption certainly does increase stress, increase anxiety, and increases depression. So that's my response. Did you have something you want to say, Ms. Merritt?
I agree. I think it is important, first of all, to understand what watching that type of visual repeatedly does to your nervous system. Even though you don't really think about that while you're watching it, there are things that are happening to our nervous systems as we watch those videos. So first, be mindful of what's happening to your body, your heartbeat, your breathing, your breath increases, rapid breathing. Be aware of all of that stuff as you're taking in that information. Like Dr. Collins said, you want to be well informed, but what you don't want to do is overload your nervous system. And then when you get done watching all of that stuff, your senses are heightened all the way up here, and you have no idea how to bring yourself down. That is because we consume too much. And I will always say that is based on the individual, but I also want to make everybody aware of how desensitized we've become because it's constantly in our feed. So I don't want people to think that because they don't panic when they see it, that it's not affecting their nervous system. It is. It's just that we are desensitized because we see it so much. Like my grandmother used to say, guard your gates. That's your eyes, your ears, your heart, your mouth, like guard all of that stuff and just be very mindful about how much of that you take in.
Thank you. So our next question is about first steps regarding self-care or self-love. Well, one, are there different first steps per segments of the population? So for instance, are there different first steps for men, women, for adolescents, for seniors? And if so, what are the differences in the first steps to self-care?
If I can go first, I think
that's fine.
I think that's based on the individual, what your first step is going to be. I think if it's based on the individual, and it's also based on like how stressed out you are. So if somebody realizes that they're stressed, but it's not like magnified stress, their first step might be identifying an activity that they can do to kind of decompress. For somebody who is a Black woman, I'll use myself as an example. So for me as a Black woman, there are so many intersections to what's happening in the world right now. It's like, so there are things that are happening to Black people that affect me. And then there are things that are happening to women that affect me. And then when we cross those sections, there are things that are happening to Black women that are affecting me. So my first step might be talking to somebody, because there are too many intersections for me to just find an activity and then that do it for me. So I think it's based on where the individual is and what the individual's needs are. And then you can determine what the first step should be in self-care.
Right. And I would agree with 100%. It certainly does depend upon the individual. What's most important is that it's this first step is something that enables you to prioritize yourself. What might be an important first step for me might not be the same thing for you. Mm-hmm. So figure out how you can prioritize yourself. What is it that brings you joy? What is it that brings you happiness? It could be going for a walk. It could be some time alone. It could be connecting with friends. They mentioned adolescents. It could be, texting with a friend group with men. It could be some time with the guys, doing sports. And of course, we have to take into account now with COVID, a lot of these options might not be as readily available, but it depends upon the individual. But what's most important is that you prioritize yourself, that you love yourself, that you value yourself enough to say, this is what I need to do to take care of myself, because if I don't take care of myself, I'm not going to be able to take care of others and give to others.
Thank you. And I believe that your last point, Dr. Collins, it allows us to really effectively look at this next question, which considers self-care at times to be, or self-care to be, a position of privilege. So how do we initiate self-care if it feels as though there is a privilege associated with, or a sense of selfishness associated with, engaging in self-care when you may have children or a husband or a wife, or you may look around in your community and see persons with so little? So how do we truly invest in self when we may be mindful of what is happening around us, and not say that those things have to be separate?
Sure. What I would say, certainly in my slides, I try to emphasize how important it is for people to accept and acknowledge the fact that self-care is not about being selfish. It's about taking care of yourself. And in terms of self-care and privilege, I would say that I would still maintain that you have to take care of yourself and prioritize yourself. Otherwise, you will not be able to give to others, be it, if you want to, let's say, volunteer, at a shelter, volunteer, to do a voting bank or something like that. If you don't have the energy within yourself to do this, then you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to give of yourself. It's not about privilege. It's about preservation, as I said earlier. It's not about being self-indulgent. This is what is required in order for me to be at my best, to be able to operate so that I can, in fact, have something to give to others, because otherwise I'm going to become depleted. Otherwise, I'm going to become burned out. I talked about stress earlier. Well, we don't want to go from being stressed to experiencing burnout, because that's really stress to the extreme. And so we have to really kind of stop and realize it's not about privilege. It's not about being selfish. Is about me valuing myself so I, in fact, can in turn give to others. I don't know if you have any other thoughts about that, Ms. Merritt.
Sure. I think that first of all, I think about self-care and privilege as a very real thing. Self-care is a privilege in some aspects. What I think we have to do is acknowledge that everybody's self-care doesn't look the same. That's the first thing. And I absolutely believe that engaging in self-care, if you are somebody that cares about your community and you care about your neighbors and you love your neighbors, when you love on yourself, it actually makes room for you to be able to love other people. So if I get my self-care and I make sure that my mental health is good and my physical health is on point, I'm going to look at the single mother who has a bunch of kids or is working a double shift or whatever the case may be. And I'm going to see how I can be supportive of her, or I'm going to be supportive of them, for people who don't necessarily have the privilege of going to get their nails done. Because I think sometimes people think about self-care and they think about extravagant things to do, and not knowing that 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes is still valuable time. And social media doesn't help it, because it gives us all of these unrealistic images of people on yachts and beaches. And everybody can't do that. I can't do that. Like, so I have to be aware that my self-care may look different from other people. And once I get what I need, because I am so one of those people who is caring about my neighbors and the people around me, I need to figure out what other people need so that I can jump in and be supportive. We can be community. And that's really important. Looking around and figuring out, okay, now that I've done my part, what can I do to help somebody else to make sure that they get 10, 15, 30 minutes that they need?
Thank you both, Dr. Collins and Mrs. Merritt, for extremely comprehensive answers to today's discussion questions. We have actually gone over a little the end of our session for today, but I will ask, can you please leave us with some closing thoughts and or actions as we move forward? So our charge forward.
I would say that to certainly prioritize yourself, schedule some time to engage in self-care. And again, we're not talking about, as Ms. Merritt said, anything extravagant. It could, some of the people that I work with, we have an agreement that they're going to start the day off positively, be it with prayer, be it with meditation, be it with taking just a couple of minutes to write down the things that they're grateful for when they wake up in the morning. And then hopefully at the end of the day, before they turn in, they can look at those 3 things and add 3 things that happened during the day that they were grateful for. But it's about scheduling some time to prioritize yourself, to love yourself, to hug on yourself. Because again, if you don't do it, nobody is going to do it. Nobody can take care of you and give and provide that self-care that each of us needs if we don't do it ourselves. Nobody else can do it. So I would strongly suggest an action plan might be to schedule self-care. What time can I consistently schedule and commit to devoting that time to myself, just to kind of think, to wind down, to be by myself? That's really important.
I agree with Dr. Collins. Prioritize it, schedule it, because what we have a tendency to do is put it off. It's like, but I got to do this real quick, and I got to do this real quick, and I got to do this real quick. And what we don't understand is that we can't operate from empty tanks.
Right.
And we aren't able to fill our tanks in the same way that we used to pre-COVID. So it's very important to make that a priority to get your tank filled, so that you can continue doing all of those things on your to-do list, because it's not going to benefit us to get all 10 things done on our to-do list if we don't have the energy to give to them. We just doing them to get them done, versus making your self-care a priority so that you can refuel and you can give 100% to whatever it is, whatever task it is you need to get done. So I totally agree with Dr. Collins when it comes to make it a priority, just because it is absolutely about self-preservation. Make it a priority.
Thank you. Thank you both, Dr. Collins and Mrs. Merritt, for an extremely engaging and informative presentation. And we thank the family members who have attended today, not only today's presentation, but the previous parts of the Fam Strong series. Again, on behalf of the Morehouse School of Medicine Prevention Research Center, we thank you for attending today's presentation. We thank you for participating in the Fam Strong virtual series. And we encourage you to connect with the Morehouse School of Medicine via your favorite social media platform using hashtag FamStrong20.